She looked me in the eye and said, "I don't want a dress from some woman who lived off her husband's money, pretending it was love. Stop performing." Then she tore the wedding dress I had made with my own 2 hands, right in front of 200 guests who had come to celebrate her. 6 months of my life, every single stitch placed in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, and she shredded it like it was nothing more than a paper napkin. I stood there on the dais, bathed in the soft, unforgiving lights of the sterling grand atrium, and felt nothing. No scream caught in my throat, no tears pricked at my eyes. There was only a silence so profound it felt like a physical force, a pressure building behind my ribs. I was not prepared for this kind of betrayal, not from her. But what Serafina, my daughter, didn't know was this. The dress was not the only thing I had brought with me that day. And before the night was over, something far more significant than silk and lace would be torn wide open. The music didn't stop. That's the first detail my mind clung to in the aftermath. After the sickening rip of handcrafted silk echoed in a room that had fallen utterly silent, the string quartet in the corner just kept playing. A sweet, soft, achingly stupid waltz. I remember the look on the first violinist's face. A mask of pure confusion, his eyes wide over his instrument, but his bow arm, trained by years of repetition, just kept moving. And me, I remained perfectly still. I didn't reach for the ruined fabric she'd contemptuously dropped at my feet. I didn't whisper her name. I didn't ask her why. In that one clean, brutal moment, I already knew. There are moments in life that arrive without prelude. No ominous music, no foreshadowing. Just a single, clean slice that leaves you bleeding from places you never knew were vulnerable. That was the moment she gave me. My daughter. She stood on that stage, the couture gown she'd insisted on buying, looking pristine on her body, but a raw, ugly rage contorted her beautiful face. She had rehearsed this. The words were too polished, the delivery too precise for it to be a spontaneous act of anger. "I don't need a dress from some woman who lived off her husband's money, pretending it was love. Stop performing." Then she tore it, not the gown she wore, but the one I had made, the one I had carried to the venue myself, boxed in pale blue satin, pressed, folded, and protected like a sacred relic. The very one she had wept over during her final fitting 3 weeks ago, whispering that it made her feel like a queen. She had taken it from my hands in front of our friends, our family, our business associates, and shredded it in the same instant she shredded my name, my love, my very identity as her mother. It took her less than 10 seconds to annihilate 6 months of devotion. A collective gasp swept through the atrium. From the corner of my eye, I saw someone drop a champagne flute. It shattered on the marble floor with a sound that felt like a distant echo of my own breaking heart. My late husband's sister, Eleanor, pressed a hand to her mouth, her face a canvas of horror, as if she'd just witnessed a public execution. My oldest friend, Julian, the event organizer, stood frozen near a towering floral arch, his hands locked mid-clap. And still, the music played on, a surreal soundtrack to my humiliation, as if the cellist and the pianist had collectively decided this was simply part of the evening's perverse entertainment. Maybe it was. Maybe my entire life for the past 32 years had been a show, and I was the only one who didn't have the script. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. My hands remained limp at my sides. With a stillness that felt borrowed from a stranger, I turned and walked off the stage. My heels clicked against the polished marble floor of the side hallway, each sharp sound a final, punctuating sentence. By the time I reached the private preparation room the venue had assigned me, the one intended for quiet moments of reflection and refreshment, my hand was already steady as I turned the lock. The click of the deadbolt was the first sound that truly belonged to me. The room was too white, too sterile, a pristine space where nothing messy was ever supposed to happen. But the mess was already here. It was inside me. I sat down on a velvet chaise. Not slowly, not dramatically. I just sat. My alligator skin handbag was on the couch where I'd left it that morning, tucked neatly beneath a cashmere shawl. Inside it was a folder, the one my lawyers had drawn up 3 months ago. I took it out, the thick vellum paper cool against my trembling fingers, and laid it on the vanity before me. The Beacon Hill penthouse, the 47% ownership stake in the Vance Atelier brand, the scholarship trust for young designers that I had dreamed Serafina would one day manage with grace and vision. It was all there, neatly itemized, a lifetime of work and love, ready to be signed over. The fountain pen was still clipped to the inner flap. I hadn't signed it. Not yet. I looked at my reflection in the ornate mirror, not at the makeup, not at the pearl earrings, not at the carefully constructed chignon, but at the woman behind the mask. The woman who had built an empire from a single sewing machine in a dusty back room. The woman who had survived her husband's death and the brutal world of fashion. The woman who had just been dismantled by her own child. My hand hovered over the pen, then dropped, not because I was unsure, but because in that blinding flash of pain, something had become terrifyingly clear. She didn't tear the dress just to hurt me. She tore it because she was certain I would never, ever fight back. That was the part that struck me to the bone. The betrayal wasn't just in the insult, it was in the cold, meticulous calculation, in the way she chose her moment when I was at my most vulnerable, my most emotionally exposed, doing what mothers are conditioned to do best, giving. I had given her everything. And it wasn't enough. She wanted more. She wanted it all. And for the first time in a very long time, I was no longer interested in protecting anyone but myself. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't call a friend. I just sat with the cold, hard facts. The dress was ruined. The moment was public. My silence would be interpreted, as always, as weakness. And yet I had not signed that document. I had not given her my name, my business, my home, my trust. That was all still mine. That had not been shredded. Not yet. Have you ever watched someone smile in your face while they were quietly plotting how to erase you? That's what this was. And within 24 hours, I would learn that my daughter wasn't just cruel on instinct. She was strategic and just stupid enough to leave a trail. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't heartbreak that kept me awake, nor the lingering sting of humiliation. It was something quieter and far colder. A kind of preternatural stillness settled over me, making every hour stretch into an eternity. It was the kind of silence that craves not comfort, but space. I sat in the grand suite of the hotel adjacent to the venue, the walls too polished, the furniture too impersonal. Even the lamplight felt artificial, as though nothing in this room had ever borne witness to real life. The dress was gone, swept away by the venue staff, now likely residing in a black trash bag behind the reception hall. But the folder was still here. The folder with my entire life sealed inside. I laid it on the coffee table, its weight a familiar burden. It had been printed 3 months prior, notarized, checked, and rechecked by the best legal minds in Boston. My signature line at the bottom remained starkly, beautifully blank. My plan had been to sign it during a quiet moment at the reception, a symbolic passing of the torch. I would have handed it to my lawyer first thing Monday morning. A mother letting go, a new generation rising, a legacy transferred not with bombast, but with implicit trust. Now, I couldn't bring myself to touch the pen resting beside it. This wasn't indecision. It was the icy grip of clarity. I knew what had to be done. I just needed a minute for my heart to catch up to my hands. Around 2 a.m, a soft, controlled knock echoed at the door. No urgency, just presence. I knew who it was before I opened it. Genevieve stepped inside, her cashmere coat still buttoned, her silver hair slightly damp from the misty night air. She looked at me the way only someone who has known your deepest pride and your worst regret can look at you. Not with pity, but with a profound, weary knowing. She didn't speak. She didn't have to ask. Her gaze fell on the folder, and she understood. She sat down, pulling off her leather gloves one finger at a time, her movements deliberate. "You didn't sign it," she said, not a question, but a statement of fact. I simply nodded. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, stayed on mine. "Good," she breathed, a small puff of relief in the silent room. She didn't need any more explanation. That's the thing about friends who have weathered decades with you. They don't need the gory details. They feel the fracture in the earth beneath your feet. She poured a glass of water from the carafe on the sideboard. "I always thought Serafina admired your strength, Elara," Genevieve said softly, turning back to me. "Now I realize she mistook it for softness. That mistake is on her." I leaned back against the stiff cushions. My bones ached. I felt every one of my 73 years, yet my mind was sharper than it had been in a decade. I said nothing, but I opened the folder again, flipping through the pages. Each line of dense black ink represented a contract I was now prepared to break. Every clause, once designed to protect the legacy for her, now felt like a cage I had almost willingly walked into. The penthouse, the shares, the scholarship fund, it was all here, and it was all still mine. I closed the folder with a quiet finality and set it aside. A few hours later, just as the first gray fingers of dawn crept across the Boston skyline, Genevieve dozed in the armchair. I sat with my back straight, watching the light shift across the carpet. My phone buzzed on the table. An email. A no subject line, no sender name I recognized. But the first line of the preview froze the blood in my veins. "You don't know me, but I owe you something." I opened it. There was no greeting, just a single video file attached. Beneath it, one sentence. "You helped me get through law school. I never forgot." The initials at the bottom were simple. JK. My heart hammered against my ribs as I downloaded the video. I pressed play, and there she was, Serafina. She was in a sleek boutique conference room I didn't recognize, sitting across from a lawyer I did, Alistair Finch, young, sharp, and known for pushing ethical boundaries. She was speaking, her voice calm, confident, too confident. I heard my own name. I heard hers. I heard the words transfer, paperwork, and notarized without her knowledge. Then I heard the most chilling phrase of all, power of attorney. She was planning to forge it, to have me sign documents under the false pretense that they were something else entirely. She was already moving 2 steps ahead of my generosity, as if my consent was merely an inconvenient detail to be managed. Then came the final blow. She laughed, a light, airy sound devoid of warmth. "Honestly, Alistair," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "she'll sign anything if I cry hard enough." I paused the video. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating with a slow, steady, lethal rhythm. I was no longer in the dark. I wasn't just a mother who had been hurt. I was an adversary who had been informed. I walked over and gently touched Genevieve's arm. She woke instantly, her eyes clearing as she saw the look on my face. She knew something had fundamentally changed. I handed her the phone without a word. She watched the video in complete silence. When it ended, she exhaled slowly, a long, controlled breath. "So that's what this is," she whispered. "Yes," I answered, my voice a low murmur. "That's what this is." I returned to the table where the folder lay. I no longer needed to sign it or destroy it. I needed to use it, because now I had something far more valuable than a transfer of assets. I had proof, and proof, when handled with precision, could dismantle an empire built on appearances. Serafina had torn my gift to her in front of the world. Now it was my turn, and I wasn't going to do it with a scream. I was going to do it with a spotlight. The morning after the wedding didn't begin with a sunrise. It began with a knock. I had just stepped out of the shower, my hair wrapped in a towel, my robe cinched tight. The folder was still on the table, a silent testament to the night's revelations. Genevieve opened the door to admit a woman named Paula, a tech coordinator from the venue. She was dressed in practical black, her expression professional and discreet. She'd worked with Julian for years. There was no need for pleasantries. By 9:30, the plan was in place. Serafina had scheduled a farewell brunch for family and VIP guests. It was meant to be her victory lap, a curated final word on the weekend's events. Champagne, mimosas, and a last parade in front of her sponsors. It was also the perfect stage. I handed Paula the flash drive containing the video. She didn't ask what was on it. She only asked for the cue. I gave her a precise timestamp. Not at the beginning, not during the toasts, but just before dessert, when the mood would be light, the attention high, and Serafina's guard at its absolute lowest. Paula nodded once and left. After she was gone, Genevieve looked at me, a question in her eyes. "This will change everything, Ilara." "They were already changed," I replied. "We didn't need to rehearse. All I had to do was show up." By 11, I was dressed. A simple sheath dress in dark navy, low heels, hair pulled back. I looked like what I was, a woman of business. The brunch was already buzzing. Serafina, in a cream silk dress, floated from table to table, wearing a mask of humility like expensive perfume. She laughed a little too loudly, hugged people a little too long. I watched her from the back of the room, a ghost at her feast. Julian spotted me near the entrance, his mouth tightening into a thin line. He leaned in close. "Paula has the cue set. I just need your signal." I gave him a single sharp nod. I didn't sit. I didn't mingle. I stood at the edge of the room, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. At 12:23, just as predicted, Serafina took the microphone. She thanked everyone for being part of the most beautiful day of her life. She thanked her team, her planner, even Julian, but she never mentioned me. She raised her glass, talking of new beginnings and love. Then she smiled brightly and said, "And now, a special little video, a surprise tribute from my team." That was my cue. As she turned toward the large screen behind her, Julian tapped a control panel. The room darkened. The screen lit up. And the performance ended. There she was, Serafina on camera, her voice cool and sharp, discussing my assets as if they were already hers. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the projector. Then came the damning sentence, echoing in the silent space. "She'll sign anything if I cry hard enough." The cruel, dismissive laughter that followed wasn't from the audience. It was from the woman on the screen. In the real room, no one laughed, not a single soul. The silence was thick, sharp, suffocating. It was the same silence I had carried all night. Now it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to everyone. Serafina turned slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief, her mouth hanging open. Someone at a nearby table gasped. I saw two of the primary sponsors from a Parisian luxury brand exchange a horrified look. One of them, a woman in her 60s with eyes like chips of ice, stood up and walked out without a word. Serafina tried to speak, but Julian had already killed the microphone. I walked forward then, my steps measured and certain. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I turned to the crowd, the friends, the relatives, the investors who had witnessed my humiliation the night before. I held up the leather-bound folder. "This was going to be hers," I said, my voice steady and clear. Then I let it drop into the polished silver waste bin beside the stage. That was it. No theatrics, no lengthy explanation. Just the unvarnished truth presented without apology. The crowd didn't clap. The moment didn't call for noise. It called for clarity. As I turned to leave, I didn't look back. I left Serafina frozen on the stage, standing in front of a room that no longer saw a charming heiress, but a cold-hearted predator. Whatever empire she had planned to build on charm and deceit had cracked wide open in less than 2 minutes. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just walked out into the bright, indifferent daylight. And for the first time in 32 years, I didn't feel like anyone's mother. I felt like myself. The day after the brunch, the story was already spreading, not through gossip sites or scandal blogs, but through a far more potent channel, the quiet, professional grapevine of Boston's elite. It traveled like a shift in the air, the kind that makes people stop returning phone calls and sponsors reconsider their investments. The kind of ruin that doesn't need to trend to be absolute. Genevieve had predicted it. The silence, she'd said, would do the rest. She was right. I didn't issue a statement. I didn't need to explain myself. I had said everything by showing the truth. That morning, the silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was cleansing. I sat in the corner of the hotel cafe when Julian walked in. His role in the weekend's events was officially over, but he saw me and came over, his face etched with a weary sort of sadness. He sat across from me. "She tried to call me last night," he said, his voice low. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you answer?" He shook his head. "No point. She only calls when she thinks there's something left to salvage." He looked tired, not from the long hours of the event, but from the crushing weight of the truth. Julian had known Serafina since she was 12, had watched her grow from a child who adored my runway gowns into a woman who believed she was owed the world. "They're already pulling the Paris deal," he said quietly. The Paris deal was a massive campaign Serafina had been orchestrating for months. A luxury skincare brand was set to make her the face of their North American launch. It was gone now. One video, that was all it took. I felt no triumph, only a quiet confirmation of a grim reality. Julian reached into his coat and slid a thick envelope across the table. I opened it. Inside were 3 handwritten letters. The first was from Elise, one of my oldest seamstresses, long since retired. She wrote that she had seen the clip and wept, not for me, but for how far we can fall when we forget the hands that raised us. The second was from a former assistant, Monica, who thanked me for not staying silent, saying she had shown the video to her own daughter as both a warning and a lesson. The third was from a woman I didn't recognize until the second line. "You probably don't remember me," she wrote, "but 20 years ago you gave me a ride home in the rain. I was the intern who got stuck after the gala. You told me never to apologize for taking up space." She ended with one line. "Last night, you finally took up the right space." I placed the letters in my handbag as Julian stood to leave. "You reminded people who you really are, Ilara," he said, "and who she really is." Later that afternoon, a call came from my legal team. The Office of Adult Protective Services had officially opened an inquiry into financial exploitation. Serafina's actions at the wedding, combined with the video evidence of her intent to commit fraud, had triggered a review. It would be slow, quiet, but it was real. Her turn to answer questions was coming. That night, I returned home to the Beacon Hill penthouse. It felt sterile, staged. Serafina had sent a service to prepare it for my return. The fridge was stocked with almond milk and exotic fruits I never ate. There were fresh white roses on the table with a card that read, "Welcome back, Mom." I threw it in the trash without a second thought. I opened the doors to the terrace. The city lights of Boston stretched out beneath me, a glittering, indifferent tapestry. Everything below looked so small, so manageable. Inside, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of Serafina's former clients, a woman who had been notoriously difficult. "Hi, Alara. I just wanted to say thank you. Nothing more. Some things don't require applause. Some things are their own conclusion." And I was finally reaching mine. 2 days later, I took the elevator to the top floor of the Vance Atelier building for the first time in nearly a year. I wasn't there to design or consult. I was there to make something disappear. The young head of operations, Carter, met me at the elevator, his suit a size too tight, his demeanor a mixture of awe and caution. He led me into the boardroom. The entire company had seen the clip. I could feel it in the averted gazes in the hallway. I pulled out a new folder. This one contained a single page, a formal, irrevocable withdrawal of all future brand licensing under my name. The Vance Atelier brand would continue, but the name Alara Vance would no longer be attached to any new product. It was over. Carter read the document twice, his face pale. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. I stood, shook his hand, and walked out. That was the end of Alara Vance, the brand, but it was not the end of the name. That same afternoon, I was in my lawyer's office. Her team had a file waiting, one with a new name on it, the Whitlow Foundation, named for my own mother, registered, structured, and funded by the assets I had almost signed away. Its mission was precise: to support women over 60 who had suffered emotional and financial exploitation by family members. The truth is, I wasn't listening to the numbers. I was thinking about the letters that had started arriving by the dozens. A woman whose daughter had drained her retirement account. A man whose son-in-law had threatened to evict him from his own home. A mother in Kansas who had sold her engagement ring to fund her daughter's business, only to be barred from the premises once it became successful. These were not strangers. These were women who had given until they had forgotten how to hold anything back for themselves. I had been one of them. That evening, I took a cab to a small studio space in the South End, a place I hadn't entered in almost a decade. It was dusty and smelled faintly of linen and old perfume. This was where I had started, before the investors, before the branding, before the boardrooms. In a back room, I found a box marked with my initials. Inside were remnants of dresses that never made it to the runway, pieces too personal to sell. I opened a second box and found the salvaged remnants of the wedding dress Serafina had torn. The venue staff had carefully folded the pieces. I hadn't been able to throw them away. I ran my fingers over the delicate lace, the intricate beadwork, the silent labor of months. Then I took out a pair of shears. One by one, I began to cut each piece into long, even strips. I didn't cry. I was making something new. By midnight, I had 12 fabric bands, each one sewn with a line of hand-stitched thread in a soft slate gray. Each one bore the same message: you are not invisible. I placed them in individual boxes, no logos, no notes. They would go to 12 women I had chosen from the letters, the first recipients of the Foundation's inaugural gesture. Not for press, not for show, just for dignity. In that dusty studio, with scissors in my hand, I realized something profound. Serafina had tried to wear my name like a crown she hadn't earned. But real names have weight, and sometimes the only way to keep yours is to take it off the shelf, strip it of all its gilded artifice, and begin again.